Something unusual is happening. Just hours after the sun unleashed one of its largest eruptions, a magnitude 7.5 quake struck the Drake Passage near Antarctica. Again and again, the timing lines up. It's no longer just coincidence. It's a rhythm, a chain reaction. As it builds, millions will be affected. Earthquakes happen all the time. On average, the planet experiences more than a dozen magnitude 7 earthquakes every year. They're part of the tectonic life, the shifting plates grinding, colliding, and releasing stress that builds deep in the crust. But what we've seen this year, it's different. The timing of these quakes and what happens in the sky just before them is beginning to raise eyebrows. Let's go back a few months. On May 2nd, 2025, a magnitude 7.4 earthquake struck the very same region of the Drake Passage. That quake came on the heels of a heightened solar activity, eruptions and flares blasting charged particles into space. Then, in late July, Earth was hit with a stream of solar wind from a coronal hole, and just days later, a magnitude 8.8 megaquake rocked the planet. And now, here we are again. The sun erupts and the Earth follows suit. So, what's really happening? Is there a connection, or are we just seeing coincidence? To understand this, let's break down the two sides of the story. On one side, we have the sun, a massive nuclear engine throwing off energy in every direction. Sometimes it does this calmly, in the steady stream of solar wind. Other times, it does it violently, blasting out solar flares and coronal mass ejections, giant eruptions of plasma and magnetic energy. When these storms hit Earth, they can trigger auroras, knock out satellites, and in extreme cases, destabilize power grids. On the other side, we have Earth, a planet with a hot, molten core, tectonic plates drifting on a semi-fluid mantle, and immense pressure constantly building beneath the surface. Earthquakes happen when the pressure finally breaks through those faults in the crust. For decades, the official stance has been simple. Earthquakes are caused by geology, not space weather. And that's true. The energy released by a tectonic fault rupture dwarfs anything the sun can directly deliver. But here's where things get interesting. Several studies over the last few years suggest that while the sun doesn't cause earthquakes, solar storms might act as some type of trigger, a final nudge that sets off a fault already loaded with stress. Think of it like this. The fault is a stretched rubber band, wound tighter and tighter over time. The sun is creating the tension, but when it sends a surge of charged particles that disrupt the Earth's magnetic field, it might be enough of a tap to make that band finally snap. The timing is what grabs attention. Back in September of 2017, the first interstellar object ever observed, Oumuamua, zipped through the solar system at almost the exact same time the sun erupted back-to-back monster X-class flares. The Earth was struck by a magnitude 8.2 quake in Mexico. Now, fast forward to today. Another interstellar visitor, 3I Atlas, is now making its way in from deep space, and once again, the pattern is repeating. Solar eruptions, followed by major seismic events here on Earth. Coincidence? Maybe. But when the same rhythm plays out again and again, people start paying attention. This latest event struck at a depth of about 10 kilometers. Shallow enough to spread its energy widely across the globe. Agencies around the world logged it as magnitudes ranging between 7.3 and 7.6, but most agreed to settle on 7.5. The tsunami alert that briefly followed was canceled when waves never materialized. Still, the shaking was strong enough to remind us that Earth isn't acting alone. It's part of a larger system, one where the sun, the Earth, and even passing interstellar travelers appear to be moving in step. And this fall, that system is only going to get more active. Every so often, something drifts in our solar system that doesn't belong here. Not a comet from the Oort cloud, not an asteroid from the belt, but a true outsider, an object from interstellar space traveling across the stars, cutting into our neighborhood for a brief moment before disappearing forever. The first time we've ever witnessed one was in 2017. Astronomers spotted it by accident, a cigar-shaped rock tumbling past the sun nearly 60,000 miles per hour. They called it Oumuamua, a Hawaiian word meaning scout or messenger from afar. It didn't behave like a normal comet or asteroid. It accelerated slightly as it left, as if something more than gravity was at work. Some scientists chalked it up to outgassing, jets of vaporized ice giving it a push. Others weren't so sure, but the mystery remained. Then, in 2019, another interstellar traveler appeared, Comet 2I, Borisov, this time looking more like a traditional comet with a visible tail. That made 2 confirmed visitors, and now, in 2025, we're watching the third 3I Atlas. Atlas isn't following the neat circular orbit of a planet. Its path slices in at a steep angle, almost perpendicular to the plane where most of the solar system planets travel. That orbit tells us one thing: this object is not from here. It came from deep space, like traveling for millions of years before we ever saw it. And here's where it gets strange. Just like Oumuamua, Atlas seems to be moving in sync with solar chaos. Back in 2017, Oumuamua's brief swing through the inner solar system lined up with double-digit X-class solar flares, and a quake that was 8.2 in magnitude. That was in Mexico. Now, with Atlas on approach, we're already seeing the same pattern. Powerful flares, surging solar winds, and a major 7.5 quake in the Drake Passage. Now, skeptics will say it's all random chance. After all, earthquakes happen every year, and the sun has flares all of the time, but think about the scale here. Interstellar objects are extremely rare. We've only seen 3 in human history. 2 of them have coincided with spikes in solar activity. Both times, Earth responded with major quakes. When events that rare start overlapping, you don't just brush them off. Atlas isn't just drifting by unnoticed. Its path will bring it into close alignment with Mars in early October. That's important because Mars, like Earth, has a magnetic field and a thin atmosphere that reacts to solar storms. When an interstellar object cuts through the solar wind, surrounded by its own cloud of dust and plasma, it can create turbulence in the sun's electromagnetic current sheet. Think of the current sheet as an invisible river of energy flowing out from the sun, rippling across the entire solar system. If Atlas is stirring that river, the effects can cascade outward, sparking flares, intensifying storms, and possibly, just possibly, lining up with the kind of tectonic releases we've been seeing here on Earth. It's tempting to think of objects like Oumuamua and Atlas as nothing more than rocks, but the truth is, they're giant conductors of plasma and dust, wrapped in magnetic fields of their own. When they interact with the sun, they don't do it quietly. The sun reacts, and when the sun reacts, so does the Earth. We don't fully understand the chain of cause and effect. No one is claiming Atlas is causing quakes, but when you see the same beats repeating, an interstellar arrival, solar chaos, Earth shaking, it starts to feel like it's part of a larger symphony. Atlas will reach its closest approach to the sun in late October, sliding just inside the orbit of Mars but far beyond Earth. It won't collide with us, and it won't even be visible to the naked eye. But its electromagnetic signature and the turbulence it brings into the solar system could continue to line up with major Earth events. So, if the last few months are any indication, the Drake Passage quake may not be the final act. We're entering a season where the sun, the Earth, and a visitor from the stars are all moving in step. And history suggests that when that happens, the results are anything but quiet. Earthquakes and solar storms are dramatic enough on their own. And an interstellar visitor like Atlas, and you've already got a recipe for strange occurrences. But the bigger picture is even more striking. In the background, the planet themselves are moving into rare alignments. These resonances don't just happen every year. Some take decades, even generations to repeat. And this time, they're stacking on top of everything else that we're already seeing. So let's start with two familiar giants, Saturn and Neptune. Every 35 to 37 years, they line up with what's called a conjunction, meaning from Earth's perspective, they occupy nearly the same point in the sky. These conjunctions have a long history of being tied to sweeping cultural and environmental shifts. The last one occurred in 1989, just as the world was entering a new geopolitical order. Before that, 1953, and before that, 1917, in the middle of the First World War. In February of 2026, Saturn and Neptune will meet again. But this one is different because it doesn't happen in isolation. Other players are stepping into the stage at the same time. Now, here's where it gets technical, but stick with me. Along with Saturn and Neptune, we also have Pluto and Uranus, positioned about 60 degrees away from them, forming what's called a minor grand trine. Think of it as a triangular pattern of resonance linking outer planets that each govern vast forces. Saturn has structures and cycles and limits. Neptune, the unseen, the deep oceans, the hidden currents. And Pluto, transformation, upheaval, endings and rebirths. And Uranus, shocks, electricity, sudden change. And when these planets fall into geometric harmony, their effects can echo through multiple systems at once. You don't have to believe in astrology to appreciate the physics of resonance. Just like a singer can shatter glass by holding the right note, planetary alignments have a way of amplifying natural cycles already in motion. So, what does that mean here on Earth? Think of the planet as a drum. The sun provides the beat. Solar flares and streams of charged particles. Earth's crust provides the tension. Tectonic stress ready to be released. When planetary alignments shift, the distribution of gravitational pull or the interaction with the solar wind in subtle ways, they may add up to new notes in the rhythm. Scientists studying tidal forces have shown that even slight changes in gravitational stress can influence the timing of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Normally, these are tiny effects drowned out by the larger processes inside Earth. But during certain alignments, the peaks line up, the harmonics lock in, and those small nudges may be enough to matter. Add in Atlas stirring in the solar current sheet and you begin to see the bigger picture. It's not just the sun and the earth exchanging energy. The whole system is resonating. The difference with 2025 and 2026 is the stacking of cycles. We're not just dealing with one planetary conjunction or one rogue interstellar visitor. We're dealing with all of it at once. Atlas, an outsider carrying a plasma cloud of its own. The Sun ramping up with the largest flares in its cycle. And Saturn and Neptune aligning in February for the first time in nearly 4 decades. And Pluto and Uranus adding their weight to form a resonance triangle. Each of these events on their own might not be remarkable, but when they overlap, the system behaves differently. History shows that when multiple cycles converge, the Earth often responds with dramatic shifts, not just in geology, but in society, in human history as well. It's worth remembering that the last Saturn-Neptune conjunction in 1989 was followed almost immediately by the world-shaking events. The fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the Soviet Union, revolutions in Eastern Europe. In 1953, their meeting coincided with the early years of the Cold War and an acceleration of nuclear testing. In 1917, it lined up with the Russian Revolution and America's entry into World War I. None of those events were caused by the planets, but they happened in sync. as if the rhythms of human society were responding to the same cosmic cycles. If history is any guide, the coming conjunction could signal another period of upheaval. So when we put it all together, the sun, the interstellar visitor, the rare planetary alignments, the message is clear. We're entering a period where coincidences are harder and harder to dismiss. The Earth is restless, the sun is volatile, and the sky above is clicking into a configuration that hasn't been seen in decades. Whether you see it as coincidence, resonance, or something deeper, one thing is for certain: this fall and winter will not be quiet. Patterns in the sky don't end with pretty geometry. They play out down here, where we live, in the form of storms and quakes and sudden changes that ripple through society. The sun erupts, the earth shifts, and human history keeps moving along in step. That's why what we're seeing now, Atlas sliding in and Saturn and Neptune preparing to meet, the sun firing off its biggest explosion in years, it matters. Because we're not just talking about distant objects, we're talking about forces that could directly affect our world. First, let's ground this in what scientists agree on. Earthquakes happen because of plate tectonics. Volcanoes erupt because of the magma pressure and gas buildup. Solar storms disrupt magnetic fields and satellites. None of that is in dispute, but where it gets fascinating is the timing. A tectonic fault may be locked and ready to rupture for years before it finally breaks. A volcano may build pressure for decades before one violent eruption, and the sun, constantly bubbling with magnetic energy, has its own rhythms. These systems are already unstable. They don't need a push, but sometimes a small push is all it takes. That push might come from a burst of solar wind, a spike in geomagnetic activity, or even a gravitational resonance when planets align. Not enough to cause the event, but it could be enough to trigger it at a moment when the system is already at the edge. That's why the coincidences we've been seeing are worth paying attention to. So what could this convergence actually mean for us in the next few months ahead? Here's what's on the table: earthquakes and volcanoes. With the sun pumping charged particles into Earth's magnetic field, and tectonic stress already high in certain regions, the odds increase that we'll see more large quakes, magnitude 7 or above. Volcanic systems that are already active, like Iceland's peninsula or the Kamchatka in Russia, may respond as well. In geomagnetic storms, the massive flare that preceded the Drake Passage quake came from the far side of the sun, but as that active region rotates into view, any future eruptions could be directed squarely at Earth. That means potential geomagnetic storms strong enough to disrupt power grids, communication networks, and satellites. Climate and weather shifts. While solar storms don't directly drive climate, they do interact with Earth's upper atmosphere. Add in the approaching El Niño and La Niña cycle, you have conditions for unusual weather swings heading into 2026. And then finally, societal change. If history is any guide, planetary alignments like Saturn and Neptune conjunction often mirror periods of upheaval in human society. That doesn't mean that planets cause revolutions or collapses, but the resonance is there when the natural systems are volatile. Human systems are often too. What makes this moment unique is how stacked it all feels. Imagine a storm where the wind, the tide, and the rain all peak at the same time. That's the kind of convergence that we're moving into. Here's the challenge. No one can predict the exact day or place an earthquake will strike, or the moment a volcano will erupt. Science doesn't work that way, but we can watch the patterns. When the sun erupts, when interstellar objects align, and when planetary cycles peak, that's when we know to pay attention. Already in 2025, we've seen multiple 7+ earthquakes. All of these things remind us of one thing. We're not separate from the larger system. We're part of it. The quake in the Drake Passage, the flare on the far side of the sun, and the arrival of Atlas, and the gathering of Saturn and Neptune, none of it is coincidence. It's a reminder that Earth listens to the sky, and right now the conversation is only getting louder.